What's up, everybody? We're going to do a review on this baliviper by Cerrone, and a little bit of a comparison between another knife that seems to be very controversial between these Cerrone's newer stuff is the Orca. A lot of people have even said that they don't even want to get any more Cerrone stuff simply because of the comparisons and similarities between the JK Orca and the Cerrone. Now, the baliviper in and of itself doesn't share as much resemblance, but some of his newer models do. Now, personally, I find it very hard to come up with new designs. This is a beautiful design, and to be honest, the only reason I even still have this knife is because of the design of this knife. So with that being said, I tried to design a balisong not too long ago, whenever I first got into flipping, or back into the balisong community, and it ended up looking exactly like Stitch Steel's Alien, even though I didn't know who Stitch Steel was at the time. I didn't know about the Alien. I simply drew something that I thought looked appealing in my head. Now, with that being said, everybody knows about the Orca. I'm sure Cerrone knows about the Orca. So I can't really he can't really use that excuse, because I was very much so new to the whole community and trying to learn about all these knives, and there's a bunch now. Back when I first got into knives, it was like 2009, 2010. There really weren't that many knives around in the balisong community. Really, there wasn't even much of a balisong community. It was basically a Benchmade 42. Now, with that being said, BRS came out around sometime before I had logged off, so we did have that come out, which was nice. But overall, let's talk more about this in particular. So putting aside some of the clashes that some people are having with Cerrone himself, I think we should focus on what's in front of us, that being this baliviper. And the baliviper, what it does really, really well is it looks really, really good. Okay, like this knife, in my opinion, is the best looking balisong I have, and that's unfortunately the only reason really why I keep it around. I don't really flip this thing that often. I've got my other knives and I flip them. I don't really flip this one, and there's not a huge there's not a big reason on why I don't flip it. It's not like the knife sucks. It's not a bad flipper. The balance and weight, or the balance at least, is similar to the Orca. And the Orca just does a few things better than this knife, and that's why I see myself not flipping this as well. However, this does have one benefit that the Orca doesn't have, and that is the texturing on the sides here. Both the Orca and Monarch, neither one of those have the texturing on the sides like the baliviper does, which I really do enjoy, because when you're doing things like the choker fans, and you have the knife between your fingers, or you're holding onto this portion of the knife, it stays with you. You don't feel the slipperiness, you don't feel it wanting to fly away or anything like that, which is a beautiful thing, because I feel comfortable flipping this over concrete, because I'm not going to drop it really. Whereas the Orca is very slick, and it will fall occasionally. I do drop it quite a bit more than I do this. This also has some beautiful milling here. I can't say it's my favorite handle design. I think his newer stuff with the newer handle, the slots, I think I would like more, but I'm not going to complain too much. The real downside on this knife, to be honest, is going to be this little point right here. Now, if you're mindful of it, it's not that big of a deal. However, when you're flipping and maneuvering this knife, if you get that to impact on one of your right down on your finger. That hurts quite a bit, especially if you're fast flipping. You know, if that hits you, sometimes it makes you wonder, did I grab the wrong side? Did I grab the wrong handle? I mean, it really does hurt. I know on his newer stuff, he's fixed that for the most part and brought it more forward and lessened the aggressiveness of the point, or you know, he's just smoothed it out, really, which is definitely the right thing to do, because that's really one of the big downsides I have on this knife. I do like that it has this little choil-like area, because you can do chaplains here, right? And this also does give you a little bit more clearance room if you do have the bite handle and you're going for, you know, your wrist pass, or even if you don't want to, you can let this knife impact you here and it won't cut you. Now, as far as all the corners and go, or all the edges go, the only edge on this knife that is really actually sharp is going to be your actual cutting edge, and this little thing right here, which is that is death right there. Let me tell you, that is it's one thing to get stabbed by something that's sleek and slender, but it is something completely different to get stabbed by something that is quite a bit thicker. So that definitely hurts if you get hit with that. But aside from that, all these edges here are chamfered, so you don't have any sharp edges, which is a beautiful thing. Another thing that I feel like, at the price point of about $1,300, I believe, this knife just, it has a little bit too much play. Now, of course, you can take this knife apart and you can tune it and you can make it, you know, perfect. But I feel like at the price point that that he has this knife at, you really shouldn't have to. And it doesn't have a lot of play, but it does have some, right? And one thing that I love about the Orca, we'll keep comparing here because that is something that flips similar to this, is that it has the relief milling here, the relief cuts, where you can see how, right, we have the cutout here, which is actually big enough for the blade to rest in, and then we have a heavier cutout here, a wider cut here, where it allows the knife to pick up more play without getting tap. And I love that on whenever the makers do that on their knives, because this knife is close to having tap. Even though the tolerances aren't horrible on it, it doesn't have a huge amount of play, but just because of the tolerances being a little bit, you know, underperforming on this thing, and because there's no relief milling here, it you can see how close it comes to having that tap right there. I mean, you know, if it just picks up a little bit more play in it, we'd have some tap. Thankfully the knife doesn't, but it is something to keep in mind. The pinsless design on this, you know, much like the Orca, if not basically exactly the same. I mean, you can see the comparison for yourself. You tell me if you think it looks different. I didn't think so. Basically the same thing. It does seem to hold up just fine as far as the handle gap goes. You know, with it being the same design as the Orca, I don't think durability, as far as the handle gap getting smaller, I don't think you'll have too many problems with it. The tip, I've never seen one tipped, but I've never seen anybody with this knife besides the Italian flipper, and the Italian flipper, really, I can't understand him. But just looking at this tip, I would assume that it would be pretty easy to go ahead and tip this knife. I do know Cerrone has a pretty vigorous heat treating, thermal cycling. Not sure if he does any cryo, but I know he does his heat treats pretty well, so this should be pretty close to as good of a heat treat as you can get as far as edge retention goes, and, you know, toughness, so rigidity on the tip here. Now, another thing that I don't like about this knife is going to be the handles. They're nice handles overall, but they're too blocky for me, okay? they're super square. They don't have, in my opinion, enough radius on them. They're very much, I mean, you can see the play there versus the orca. Yeah. So anyway, they're very much blocky, and I don't know that I completely like that. There is plenty of texturing on this knife, so you don't worry about it falling out, but it makes it a little bit harder to get it to roll smoothly whenever you're doing those maneuvers, well, like a choker fan, whenever you're trying to roll it through your fingers. The blockiness of it, the squareness of it, does definitely hinder the rolling ability a little bit. Now, he does have the edges chamfered, which is nice. If he didn't have the edges chamfered, of course, this would be a huge problem. But me being picky, I do have a slight problem with there not being any radius really to this top piece, and I think it would have looked better. I think it would have flipped a little bit better, and to be honest, it would have given this knife a little bit of a difference, or another edge, as if it doesn't have enough edges. It would have given it another edge against something like the orca, because the orca is also very blocky, but it is more of a rectangle, and it has basically the reverse of, instead of that doming effect, it has more of it has a concaved effect. So I think that also would have separated it a little bit more. And the problem that I run into with this knife really is that it doesn't have enough differences between the orca, and it just has a few things where it falls short. And having an orca, I don't know that I really need this. I can tell you I don't need this. The reason I keep it around is simply because of the looks. It doesn't flip any better than the orca. It flips, it's slightly under the orca, in my opinion. Now, if you had the opportunity to pick one of these up and you didn't have an orca, I would say go for it, because this knife does flip great. It is a beautiful piece. It's something that I enjoy to look at. The only thing I would say is be mindful of this radius here, or this point that they've got going on here, and other than that, you can work around the blockiness of the handles. It's much more of a nuisance than it is a failure, really. The tolerances, if you're really wanting to, you can take it apart, you can sand down on the bushings and make the tolerances better. I just feel like at the price point that this knife comes in at, you shouldn't have to. Not only that, but with me not flipping it that much, because I do have my Monarchs, my Orcas, my Bally Ballistics, I don't really feel the need to put that much time into it, because I don't flip it that often. Really, it's a beautiful knife, and you can justify the price and the unique looks of the blade with it, I think, at least. The handles, they do look good, although I think they could have been a little bit better. The flipping, from a flipping standpoint, it does flip fine. It's just, like I said, it's not really any different. There's nothing unique about it. So it does sound good, right? As you would expect. And, I'm not shitting on Cerrone. He's not a bad maker. This isn't a bad knife. This is just, on my personal scale, falling slightly below the knife that flips the same as it, but just a hair better. And everybody wants the Orca anyway, so, with the comparison of that to that, it's just this outperforms it that ever little bit more. And considering these are around the same price point, I feel like there should be differences to this knife, and there really aren't. I would say the best differences that this thing has are the side grooves here and this little choil area here. Now, if that's enough for you to make this knife worth it, go ahead. It is a good knife. It does flip well, looks great, and it holds up nicely. It's just, for me, if I could go back again, I probably would go buy something else. Now, what would I buy? I couldn't tell you. I mean, I don't know what else I would have bought, but I would have, with it being so close to the orca and me being new, I would have bought something that comparatively is a little bit different in flipping style, or does flip differently. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off here. Try not to make this thing too long, but this is a good knife. I'd give it a solid 8 out of 10, maybe 8.5 on a good day. I just feel like at the price point that this knife holds, it should be that 9.5. Anyway, that's it for me. I'll catch you all later. Peace.